Call the meetings to order, and the first meeting this evening is the Election Commission meeting. Clerk LaVoy, if you could work us through that, thank you.
All right, first we'll call it to order. Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Felder?
Here.
Germaini?
Here.
Echoangeli?
Here.
Lamore?
Yes, here.
Commissioner Vining and Whitman are both excused.
Correct.
The first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the Monday, July 2nd meeting. Could I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes
Second.
from Monday, July 2nd.
Motion by Commissioner Felder, supported by Commissioner Lamore. Need a roll call or all in favor?
All in favor is
All in
fine.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item, please.
The next item is the absent voter counting board. You had voted on that at the last meeting. However, due to the construction at the city council chambers and some moving around that we had to do of the receiving board, etc., we need to reestablish the time and the location, which is changing from the third floor conference room to what we refer to at City Hall as the Social Security office. So the absentee counting board will be at the old Social Security office beginning at 10:30 a.m. So I just need a motion to approve that.
So moved.
I'll make a motion that the absentee voter counting be relocated to the Social Security office at 10:30 a.m.
Second. This motion by Councilman Echoangeli, supported by, Commissioner Echoangeli, supported by Commissioner Lamore. And just for a little additional clarification for those that are here or will be watching later, that is on the third floor of the City Hall. So,
And we can do an all in favor.
all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very well.
All right, the next item are the precinct election inspector appointments, and this will include the receiving board, and I have furnished you with a list from precinct 1 through the receiving board. It includes what party that each inspector is associated with, and I have the chairs and co-chairs on there as well, but you've already approved those. So I don't know if there are any questions. We've appointed everyone. You will see in some areas there are fewer Republicans than Democrats. We only have one Republican left on the alternate list, and that person has yet to confirm that they'll be able to work. So that's why why she was not appointed. But we left her as an alternate. If she calls in, we'll make sure that she's appointed. But we have we've established the best balance that we can according to as we're directed to by the state.
Do you need any further action on this evening?
Other than just a motion to approve.
Okay,
And I will need a roll call vote for this one.
very well.
Your Honor, motion that we approve the election inspectors for the Tuesday, August 7th, 2018 primary as listed on the list here.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Lamore, supported by Commissioner Echoangeli. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Germaini?
Yes.
Echoangeli?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
And the final item we have is the public accuracy testing. It was approved last week for 10 a.m. on July 31st. I am suggesting that we change that to 11 o'clock. We have 4 election commissioner members available to be there at 10, but we found in the past that we do need an alternate. So in consideration of that, I'd like to move it to 11 and suggest that Mayor Clark be added as an alternate, and he will plan to be there at 11 o'clock. So we will have plenty of members then. We will have a quorum, and we will be able to conduct the test.
I'll make a motion that we schedule the public accuracy testing for July 31st at 11 a.m.
Second.
There was a motion and a second. I'll just make a comment. I know the couple of the commissioners that are not here this evening, but we're on that committee as well. We'll have to make sure to make those contacts, and if there's not a complication there as well.
Right, and I'll send an email reminder to everyone.
Wonderful, thank you. There's a motion second. You need a roll call?
All
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
All right, I have no further comments.
I'll just go through the thing. Is there any commissioner comments? Any citizens' comments? And I know it might seem why this is here at the front end before our other meeting, but by our charter, we require the Elections Commission, which is these commissioners, soon to be renamed councilmen, as we do at our meetings, but requires to go through these to make sure that we have process and policies in place for every election. So thank you, Clerk LaVoy. Just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Lamore, supported by Commissioner Germaini. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll close that meeting and we'll move on to our council work session. At this time, open the city council work session. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Whitman,
Excused?
Echoangeli,
Here.
Vining,
Excused?
Germaini,
Here.
Lamore,
Present.
Felder,
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here. With that, I'll go right to city manager, Mr. Bastu. I know that we have several items and we'll need to move right along, but if you would, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The first item we have is a presentation from DTE Power regarding some of the outages that were discussed back in early June. We've arranged to have Molly Lumber-Coy here with us and talk a little bit about what we have that was discussed back in early June about some of those outages. So.
Thank you, Mayor Clark and council members and Vince. I have with me Derek Sandburn, and Derek is our supervising engineer for power quality for the Southwest region. And I think at everybody's location, you've got a copy of a PowerPoint presentation, and this walks you through the outage issues associated with Front Street and what we've seen and done. And so I'm gonna let Derek step forward and kind of walk you through. We did get a list working with Vince of the outage areas, and we did go back and take a look at all of those areas. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having us tonight. So I'll kind of walk through the slides as they're presented. The first complaint addresses, every time we have a complaint, we vet each and every address for possible engineering solutions. For this particular outage, they're all caused by the same thing at the substation level. So we did chart these addresses, and we do keep a pretty lengthy history on outages, mostly going back 15 years, in case you guys are wondering, and if you wanted to contact Southwest Engineering at any point for history, performance, stuff like that, you can always reach out to Southwest Engineering. The second sheet shows you one of the distribution circuits, 366 front, and that is responsible for the downtown area that we are in right now. And that was the one that originally failed. I'll get to the failures later, but you can kind of take a peek at that and look at all the addresses associated with those complaints. The next page, DC 360 front, is the other portion of the city. So these two circuits pretty much handle most of the city of Monroe. And if you go on to the next page, that is the kind of a summation of the outage history. And what happened was DC 366 Front Street. It's an older substation, and the equipment associated with that distribution circuit is also older. And originally we had a cable failure on March 13th. And it's the underground cables fail. That's what they do. They have a certain end of life period. They're tested periodically to make sure they're holding load and everything is working. The substation as well. They have breakers that go through periodic maintenance. And we were up on our maintenance. It just happened to fail on that particular day. Same thing on April 15th. And what they did on April 15th is they switched the load from 366 to 360, meaning they took all the power on the one circuit, they jumpered it over to the other circuit. So both circuits were being fed independently, but they were connected to the same original cable going outside of the substation. What happened is the cable on 360 was in the same condition as 366, so it failed as well. The good and the bad of that is that it kind of forced us in, so that was a temporary situation that we came up with in the field to minimize the outage. And what we had to do to remediate permanently is that we actually had to fix both those. So at this given point, as it sits now, the station and the station cables are both fixed and up to current spec. In addition to fixing those two things, we've kind of summarized on the next slide, the remediation slide. We patrolled all the circuits. We to identify tree clearance. We identified there was a couple broken insulators which can cause issues, and a couple cross arms, transformers, etc. Just some minor stuff. Those were all turned into overhead lines and immediately fixed. We also went into the tree trim history. So the last trim was in 2011, and it's currently scheduled for 2020. And the pole top maintenance program is also scheduled for 2020. And I can open up the questions, or I can kind of go into some detail on Monroe as a whole. So when this happened, and we were called to a city council meeting, we vetted the entire area, not just Front Street, but there's 5 substations that feed Monroe. So we looked into all 5 of them, and I was actually kind of surprised because I found out later these were pretty high impact outages, and we apologize for that. But the remainder of the city has a really strong history of reliability. A couple of the substations for the last 10 years haven't experienced an outage, so that's pretty much all I have. Is there any questions?
Are there maybe some? I'll see the council first if there's questions. Councilman Lamore?
Yeah, I just want to, it sounds like you're stating that this should fix whatever happened
Absolutely.
permanently.
In fact, we've seen some over 90-degree days, and we haven't had a single complaint since the work has been done. So we believe what's been done has addressed the situation. You know, you've had several days over 90 degrees, and that, when it is over 90 degrees, you have a stressing of the system. So that's when you may see some things occurring, and we haven't seen anything.
Councilman Felder?
Did I hear that the first failure was age related to the circuit? Is that correct?
Age, yes and no. So age related to the substation system cable. So the cable, if you look at a substation, there's a bunch of different parts, and it goes from the transformer to the bus, and from the bus it goes down to a cable that goes to the first pole that starts feeding all the overhead circuitry. That cable failed. That particular piece.
Okay.
Section.
And do you guys have a maintenance schedule which you're going around and replacing these lines? Please don't tell me that we have to wait for a power failure for you guys to come out and replace the lines that...
No, you don't. We do. It's we have an underground cable replacement program, and it's the priority model is based on a number of factors. It's outage history, age, the type. There's 30 different types of cable that go into the ground, a bunch of different makeups. Some of it's in conduit, some of it's direct buried. It just depends on where it is in the matrix and how it...
And it's patrolled and evaluated, period.
Well, underground cable is not patrolled. It can't. It's underground. So the way we know if there's an outage is if an outage happens, and then otherwise we recognize certain manufacturers over a certain amount of time have stronger performance, some have less strong performance, and that's how we base the priority model. We did so after this failed, we did vet the entire city for the types and what kind of urgency each piece had.
Questions from council?
I have one.
Councilman Jermaine?
So how do you test the underground cables currently? How do you, if you were to check the maintenance on it to see how old they were, how do you do that and how often?
Well, so the testing process is actually kind of violent. So if there's old cable and you were to go through the testing process as if it was a new cable, it would fail immediately. Meaning, it's a leakage test. So you hook it up on both ends and you put an enormous, well above the typical amount of current and voltage through it. And if it fails, it fails. Almost all cable over 25 years would fail if you tested it like that. So you actually don't. We follow the prioritization model. It's all theory. It's theory and priority based on matrix of a few different attributes.
Your Honor, are we
John?
gonna, I think Ms. Dykeman would probably have some questions, since it was her questions to council that got us to this point. So,
Well,
I don't have any questions.
I have a few, and I know this tonight was a presentation, and I know that with all the items that we have, but we may have to, there may be follow-up questions that come at the council meeting through public comment as well, but my questions, I'll start first. Of course, I serve on SEMCOG, and one of the things is last year serving at SEMCOG, I was assigned to the Metropolitan Affairs Coalition Board, and one of the task forces infrastructure from all aspects, including government infrastructure, as well as the last presentation I was fortunate to be there was presentation on utilities, and DT was there. So what I heard, and this is what I'm trying to see where maybe the data can be obtained or presented in relation to what at least what I heard there. So I understand 2017 that the MPSC requested a report from DTE Energy regarding assets and failure rate calculation statistics. And what I heard at the meeting was there's a 200-page report that speaks to all of these. So I would assume then, my question is, that in that report would be a reference to the sites and locations and condition of Monroe in that report?
Not normally. Normally, it's large level assets, substation transformers, average age of poles collectively, not necessarily one circuit or another.
But the Monroe region
It's an
would be,
aggregate, right?
Yeah.
Is it more of an aggregate by region or?
Not normally. It's the portfolio comprehensively.
We could probably get you more information
Yeah.
from whoever maintains that report, you
Well,
know,
well,
specific information.
at least my note, okay. I know the microphone.
But yeah, we could follow up on that and get you a little bit more information.
I would like to see the report. It obviously wasn't presented at that meeting, but it speaks, as I was told, to all the assets and needs of, and time it needed to repair and improve. I would think there, well, maybe it is not as specific that I may be looking for, but I'd be curious to what that is, because the conversation, that question that came up from one of the board members was, well, what's the timeline and what's the capital replacement? And while I understand it is a significant number when you look at the entire system, but the answer that I heard from the presenter was next 10 to 15 years. And I think about that, and the length of that is, I know it's a broad region, but, you know, the residents are coming to the council meeting asking about the Monroe region. So you said it might be transformers, it might be a substation. I'm not sure all the exact terms. So this map helps in a view of a geographic, how it gets disseminated from one substation to another. But I'd be curious where those substations fall, not just the line, not just the inner line, not the feeding line, but where's the substation in relation to that repair age of that, and also what's the anticipated local repair schedule. So that's what I'd be looking for from this report.
So you did say you went through and evaluated the whole Monroe area.
We did, and I can't speak to the figures off the top of my head, but we do.
Right.
We do have. So I did mainly like an outage report to just
Right.
see how they do it by reliability. So the reliability kind of forces the priority, and most of Monroe is pretty reliable aside from these 4 instances.
Which is good for the city of Monroe. That means you've had very consistent reliability, with the exception of what's occurred here. And those pieces of equipment have been fixed and addressed. And like I said, we've enjoyed the past month and a half with several days over 90. And anytime you have days over 90, we have what's called heat storm, meaning it can stress the system, and we've not seen any problems.
But you are right on the 10 to 15 years. The 10 to 15 years is actually our capital investment over our entire portfolio. So you're talking from the thumb
Right.
down to the bottom of the stage.
Kind of goes back to Councilman Felder's comment is, you know, what is the I guess the plan, not just in the entire region all the way to the thumb down to the Monroe County line south, but what is, you know, when you talk about locally, how do you address from different locations within that wider region? And we all know things age, and there's, as I heard in this presentation, there are things that are quite aged. I'm not casting here, because we ourselves in the city know that we have aged infrastructure that we're working on as well in a long-term plan. That's why we have capital improvements. That's why we look at those things. So, you know, it's just, you know, that would be helpful to know that, you know, where a station may be, where the lines and how old the lines may be. That it was commented that they thought they'd last for a long, long time, and then you realize, well, 40 and 50 years have passed. And it's now here again for those work. One of the items I thought was interesting and might be beneficial to those here, because we get those notices and we get those announcements about tree trimming and why that's important. And 70% of the issues is what were reported at this meeting are issues related to trees and trimming. And of course, the time consumption to do that diverts the time of personnel that's available to do line changes or transfer stations from the 4.8 kV lines that need to be upgraded and all those things. I'm just saying in a broad picture is why I'm bringing this up, but I would be interested in hopefully getting some additional information related to the Monroe region, because we did have, I'll finish with the email I received about the power outage here just over the weekend in the Meyer and north part of the city that was out for a period of time. I'm not sure what the case or what that was for. I just know that there were some items there.
I wasn't aware of that outage.
Okay. It says Arcing Wires, the Frenchtown fire was there. It's north side. It really centered around Meyer being non-operational for, I don't know the time frame. I'm just looking at that in a broad perspective of Monroe region.
It may be serviced by Frenchtown substation as opposed to
Yeah.
Monroe, so that's probably why it's not showing up in the
Exactly.
Monroe-specific report. But I think these were equipment-related problems, not tree-related problems, correct?
Yeah, so, so
There was
this
one
year's,
tree associated with a storm that came through with high winds, but I think the rest of these were more equipment-related issues that got addressed, so.
It kind of gets back to the infrastructure question I have, and
Absolutely.
Councilman Fellers is, the timeline, and where do we fall within the timeline of all that needs to be done? And that way the residents know when it needs to be done, and if they, they hear 10 to 15 years, that sounds long for some, but depending on the volume what it is and where something else might be, we recognize that this particular station is a year out, or it's on the list for that, or line or pole replacements, things like that, because there's work orders that are started well in advance.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we did include some of that in here, some of the tree trimming and pole top maintenance. I know I work with both you and Vince to send you updates on when we are doing tree trimming, and you get maps ahead of time, and you're able to share that with the local citizenry too. So we try and keep you up to date on all of that. But we can go back and see if we can get a link maybe to that report, and that'll allow you to take a look at the report.
It gives us the opportunity then at the next council meeting or work session to also share that with the residents, and so and if there's something that comes up that we want to come back and have some more conversations. So I'll look at the council, see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple other
Yeah,
ones
John?
while Molly's here. Molly, DTE went through town a few years ago and they changed the meters out. They referred to them as smart meters. Can you explain what a smart meter does, or what it is, or how what's the function of it?
Sure. I have my engineer here. It's probably too much better, because I don't have an engineering background, but basically it does tell us when there is an outage immediately, and it reports back to a system through signals. And so, it's no different than a lot of the water smart meters that a lot of the municipalities across, Michigan, and actually smart meters, we were one of the last states to implement. A lot of these are throughout the United States, but they do give us instant data when there is an outage. I don't know if you want to add to. It's a great way of helping us understand when there is an outage, because in the past we would rely upon the individual customers just to call in through our 1-800 number. This is at least letting us know, and by that we're able to kind of define the areas that are out, and then that better helps us from an allocation of assets as to what to send as well. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Derek.
yeah, I can add to that. Then so for background too, I ran that group for a year. So I was involved in a lot of the deployment, a lot of the testing. So we test those for accuracy. We test at least 10% of our portfolio annually just to make sure they're accurate. And just because we're talking about it, they're typically accurate within a tenth of a penny. So I mean, they're right on. But she pretty hit it on the head. That's what they're there for. And then the thing that we're using them for now is we do area load analysis on an annual basis to see growth, reduction of load, and mainly it's growth. I mean, thankfully we've had a pretty booming economy, and the state of Michigan is growing at a pretty unprecedented clip, really. And it helps us to know that. Helps us to know with phase and balancing on the single phase. So for phasing specifically, if you have one phase that's too far overloaded than another, it will create voltage spikes and dips. So we try to avoid that from an engineering perspective.
Does the smart meter tell you possibility of a pending brownout?
No.
No, it just tells you when the
There's
power,
been an
when the
interruption
power
or
is out.
outage. Correct.
Okay,
There's a threshold. I believe it's 60 volts, which is about half of the leg. So when it's half that, it will let us know.
okay. The other question I have is you do have the app, you have the thing on your internet, people have it on their iPhone or their Android. If they call in, just to verify that there is an outage, do they get an automatic call back telling them when the power's gonna be back on?
Not really. If you use the DT Insight app, that will actually tell you when the crew showed up, what they're doing to fix it, and when it's fixed. The app is probably the best tool for an outage. Because we rely on the meters, but we also rely on, we still appreciate the calls and the app outages. That really helps facilitate the restoration.
Okay.
When we have storms, we will do callbacks quite a bit, or you may get an automated update through the phone system, like a computer call out with an update of the outage. That happens, in a storm situation to let you know how long it may be. But the app's very helpful.
And my last question is, where are the locations of the substations that you made the repairs to?
This one is Front Street, so the
East front?
it is on.
Yeah, East Front. And then also,
Yeah, East. Is it Conan? Conan.
Opponent.
East front and Conant? Okay.
the other substations.
They're not. I wouldn't be able to speak to their
Right.
specific location.
But-
And there's certain information that we're not specifically supposed to give to. I mean, we're the FERC regulations.
Sure.
But they
Security.
they were all evaluated though.
So the stations have been repaired? The
Yes.
equipment has been?
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay.
Replaced and repaired. Yeah.
And transformers, buswork, poles. One of my senior engineers says it all the time, but it's if you look at a location, it's very, very, very rare that a pole has cracked. We have poles that are 100 years old; they're still not going to crack. It's mainly trees. You're right. Going back to your point, and another thing you said was the resources. Trees and line work is completely independent from a resource perspective. Completely different unions. They
Yeah.
they don't share the same bucket. So if trees were to become an overwhelming defect issue, it wouldn't go into it wouldn't take away from the upgrades.
But in this case, it wasn't trees, it was equipment.
Okay, I'll have a follow-up on that, but Councilman Moore.
Yeah, just one, regarding the brownouts, I own a business downtown that was affected by the power, and I know that there were some brownouts not attributed to those dates, and I'm just wondering if this equipment would be a fix for those brownouts,
No.
not attributed to that at all.
No, brownouts are loading, and if the cable can hold the load, then the voltage level at your point wouldn't make a difference.
So I guess my follow-up kind of goes to maybe the response to Councilman Ecology. Tree trimming, we recognize the volume work that's there. The other kind of as they call them, strategic pillars was infrastructure redesign. That's a redesign of a station. Infrastructure resilience and hardening means how do you make it better than within the state in which it is. The last was technology and automation. Of course, it's the future. And, between tree trimming and getting to the future, we have the infrastructure redesign and resilience that needs to occur. I think it kind of gets where the conversation he's kind of going, I see is going back and forth, is what is the likelihood for the, it's called a substation, or where the power is generated from to get down the lines, and the age of those. And I'm hoping that report will at least give us an indication. Then from that, we might be able to get some way of an idea of what is the time frame, and one is going to be still functional before there's the technology and automation catches up and can be implemented. And if it's not, what repairs will it need, and what timeline what timeline is that on? Is there, a future work order because it's recognized of the age? So that's where I'm going. I'm looking. I think those two in the middle are the ones that are going to be continuing and causing some of the challenges. Besides the lines, which we know are 40 and 50 years old, some of those as they go underground, and they're a different type of line. There's what you're not putting in today. They're much better, of course. That makes sense. We do our capital improvements.
Sure, absolutely.
So I'll look forward to at least what that report may present, and from at least the Monroe, I like the broad perspective, but I also looking at that as from a residence and a more regional Monroe as well. So hopefully we'll have some conversation.
Absolutely, we appreciate your time.
Okay, other questions from council?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know there's maybe more other questions, and I invite those at the council meeting in the open session to please do those, make sure they get passed along, and if there's things that get sent, we'll get them passed to the
Absolutely.
residents as well.
Yep, if you have any other questions, send them to us, and we're happy to get them answered and resolved for you. Thank you.
Derek, Molly, thank you both for being here.
Yeah, I got one more thing, just because
Yep.
I know you're a business owner. We do have a power quality hotline that we take calls, we take calls whenever, but we man it weekly. And you can report those in, and we individually vet each case, whether, if you're having a brownout, whether it's a transformer capacity, the wires,
Okay.
so. We're customer minded in the sense that even if the whole area isn't being upgraded, we don't have an issue upgrading individual businesses for the sake of, progress.
Just call the number.
Absolutely. I'll give it to Molly and she can distribute it to.
Great.
You can send the link by email to Pat Weaver, and she can send it out.
Be great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Mr. Pastu, I know we have several more items, and on to the next one, please.
Next item is kind of an introduction to council regarding Enterprise Fleet Management Program. City administration's been meeting with them over the last couple of months, looking at this as a means of addressing some of our costs associated with light-duty fleet. And so we've got a little PowerPoint to go through and kind of do the introduction. Have Jason Weiss with Enterprise here as well to answer any questions. So we can get started with the presentation. Ready to go? Yep. So the items for discussion I want to go through is our current situation with our existing fleet, the benefits of the program, Enterprise Fleet Management Services, the financial impact, the reinvestment of savings into our heavy-duty fleet, and then subsequent recommendations for that. And if we can pull up the video, let's see if it's probably a couple minutes long, but I think it's a very good video of Kern County, California, talking a little bit about with their program and one of their council members' comments. Now if we can hear it.
Right.
Fleet and some other departments manage their own fleet, but I will say that the General Services Fleet Management manages 800 vehicles. This is 111 of those 800.
Okay, so 800 vehicles, that's almost 3 times what we're doing here. No, this is what, 7 times what we're doing here. So we're saving a lot of money, and if this pilot program is successful, it's going to grow exponentially.
It has that possibility. We do stand the chance of saving annually $1.5 million in kind of full blossom if the pilot is successful.
When are we going to know this pilot program is successful?
I would say after a year. It's a year or two. It's a 5-year term. The current contract is a 5-year term.
So in a year, you're going to make a determination whether or not you want to expand this program.
Yes.
The prototype of the pilot program will be judged as being successful and will migrate into a larger domain. Okay, the reason I think this is so important is this. Taxpayers expect us to manage their money as best as we can. And what I'm hearing you guys say over there is, you're asking someone in your department or someone in your organization said, why?
Oh.
Cars are going to be enter into this pilot program. That means we're taking 111 out of service and we're bringing 111 new ones in. Correct?
Yes.
What is the total number of, what's the fleet that we've got in Kern County? The total fleet?
I cannot answer the question about all fleet vehicles because some, for instance, sheriff department manages their own fleet and some other departments manage their own fleet. But I will say that the General Services Fleet Management manages 800 vehicles. This is 111 of those 800.
Okay, so 800 vehicles, that's almost 3 times what we're doing here. No, this is what, 7 times? Going backwards. So we're saving a lot of money, and if this pilot program is successful, it's going to grow exponentially.
It has that possibility. We do stand the chance of saving annually $1.5 million in kind of full blossom if the pilot is successful.
When are we going to know this pilot program is successful?
I would say after a year. It's a year or 2. It's a 5-year term. The current contract is a 5-year term.
So in a year, you're going to make a determination whether or not you want to expand this program.
Yes.
The prototype of the pilot program will be judged as being successful and will migrate into a larger domain. Okay, the reason I think this is so important is this. Taxpayers expect us to manage their money as best as we can. And what I'm hearing you guys say over there is you're asked someone in your department or someone in your organization said, why is Kern County in the car business? Because if we're managing over 800 vehicles plus the sheriffs plus the fires, we're in the car business. If we have places where we're going to bring these cars to get them fixed and we've got maintenance yards and maintenance stockpiles, we're in the car business. So the fact somebody in your organization asked the question, why are we in the car business? Is there a better way of doing this? And that is the key point of Lean Six Sigma. When you have an organization that someone at the mid-management or junior level says, why are we doing this? That is a priceless event. I mean, that is the point of what we're doing. So I'm praising you. I'm praising the effort that Kern County is making. This is just one tip of the iceberg where we can really make ourselves into the most efficient county possible. And I'm proud to see that we are no longer in the car business. We're in the governance business. So my thanks to Jason Wiebe, my appreciation to Enterprise, everybody involved in this Lean Six Sigma. Please pass the word. We're achieving success.
Michelle, if you could, that's probably a good point to stop right there. But I think part of the purpose of why I like that the presentation is that it talks about the pilot aspect of it, as well as looking to benefit from a company that's in the car business and using their expertise to help with the management of our fleet. So, in going through this, I want to go through what our current situation is and tee it up for why we think this is a good operation to consider. We have over 55 vehicles, non-emergency vehicles in our fleet, covering a number of departments. As you go through it, 21 of the 55 units are 6 years or older or have 60,000 more miles. 17 of the 55 are 10 years or older. 9 have exceeded 100,000, and 3 with more over 90. Over the past 10 years, we've purchased 4 vehicles per year, our largest purchasing being 2013 with 9. But we do have an aging light-duty fleet. The average age is 6.8 years old. Obviously, as we all know, maintenance costs rise with the fleet's age. And then they're not all, have the newer, up-to-date safety equipment such as airbags, anti-lock brakes, and then you suffer with probably some degradation in the fuel mileage. And again, part of the approach is to look at lowest total cost of ownership model, and that's all inclusive from the acquisition, the maintenance, the fuel mileage, as well as the residual value at the point in which you are to dispose of the vehicle. Again, this is part of the expertise that we get with the program through Enterprise. If we were to do this, we're looking at potentially 21 vehicles in 2019, and if we were to have that come out of our internal fund, that we'd be paying $500,000 roughly for that purchase. Some of the benefits of it is the industry fleet management knowledge. One of the provisions that we actually really like through this is real-time maintenance and fuel data. So along with the fact that you get the warning signals that it's time to change the oil or take care of another maintenance item, so it's provided for us and available on a real-time basis. There is a replacement of our aging light-duty fleet. And then one of the other real driving components, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, is reinvesting the savings into replacement of our aging heavy-duty fleet. And then it does free up some of our DPS mechanics. We've got 2 of them right now, full-time positions that could be focused more on maintenance of our heavy-duty fleet. So one of the things that we get with the service is certainly the acquisition. You know, we still have the ability to use our governmental purchasing plans that are out there, whether it's My Deal or any other state or county purchasing plans that are available. I'll talk a little bit more on the back end of that. Financing, that we would be using enterprise funding for it. And I'll walk through the sheet with the cost savings to talk about that. Certainly their enterprise fuel program, WEX, certainly well known with law enforcement, that would be available to all of our city vehicles. And then we have city use of vendors that they have. For example, the closest one that we have here is the Goodyear dealership right on 4th in South Monroe. So there's a number of local vendors that are part of their preferred maintenance group that they have, and again, provide any maintenance records into their system, so we have it on a real-time basis. Certainly one of the values also is to assist in the decision and the execution of the resale of vehicles. They know where the sweet spot is based on their experience in the industry, how long to keep them, when to get rid of them, get that maximum value upon the sale. You know, we would still have license, title, registration, still be held by the city. I think the title's still with them, but we would still have record of it, much like if you were having your own lease vehicle. And the thing that's important, it doesn't come with any of the traditional personal restrictions. And then we still insure the vehicles as well. This chart, I think, is good. It gives you a full-blown understanding from acquisition, the financing, the fuel program, maintenance, vehicle resale, you know, aftermarket customization, the title, driver safety, risk management, and their telematics that go along with it. So there's a full-blown program associated with what we would participate if we were to go forward with that. I think the thing with the open-ended lease, separate line of credit for the vehicles, you know, optimize our cash flow, flexibility with some of the funding. Again, doesn't come, you know, there is no mileage limitations associated, nor abnormal wear and tear that you would have with your personal leases. Greater flexibility, you know, to change and certainly the terms as well. So again, I think it's a driving point to understand this is not, you know, our personal type of lease. It's certainly open-ended, more of a financing tool than anything else. The maintenance program, fixed monthly rate that we would have for vehicles under the program, along with all of the benefits. There's a bridge program for our currently owned vehicles so that we can incorporate them, even though they may not be under the purchase and lease at this point in time. And again, there's a large national network servicing our program. Fuel card, again, you know, many of the local dealerships, obviously, with that, the benefits of having all of that tracked again through their program as well to keep the maintenance and the fuel records along with that. This sheet here, hard to read, I think is critically important with the process. And again, you know, over a 10-year period, we're looking at close to $500,000 in savings. A lot of it you will see is certainly on the front end of transitioning with the sale and disposal of vehicles, repurchasing, and going into an ongoing lease. And so as you look at it, much of the savings is going to be on the front end, but I think it's important when you look also with the sustainability average that there still is, you know, even after the 5-year program where everything would have been replaced, there is a marginal savings still to be incurred. But I think the intangible benefit is having, again, the maintenance records, the knowledge of at what point would be best to keep to dispose of vehicles in that regard. But But clearly, you can see on the front end there is, and if you go to the far column, you'll see the net cash savings, what would be achieved by going through this program. And I think that's significant. And again, the next slide is just the bottom part of that same analysis. So the key to it also is, okay, what do we do with this savings? We're not looking at any reduction in our charges internally for the fleet, but it does give us a chance to start replacing some of our aged heavy-duty fleet, and that's where I think the value of a lot of this as well, along with the specialization they provide, is certainly we've got two 1991 tandem axles that have red tagged already that we haven't used last year because of their condition. We've got three single axle dump trucks, 2001 Sterlings. They're about $120,000 each to purchase. And we would look through an installment purchasing program to finance those acquisitions with 1 and 2 through some of the savings that we have. And then I listed below some other items. I've listed the fourth single axle dump truck that last year we put over $30,000 into repairs. So we're not going to replace it now, but it was out of service. And clearly, I will tell you, we were a little worried about if we had any more downtime, whether we were going to stay on top of our plowing. Unfortunately, Mother Nature gave us a break and didn't tax our system. So, but you can see clearly that we've got an aged system with that. So, the recommendations for this, we have, the initial recommendation, 21 vehicles identified for 2019. I think we're going to look at 9 the following year. This is subject to some change, but we would certainly look to implement the maintenance and fuel solutions for the portion of the fleet to start with. Certainly I think it's important as we go through this to understand, Enterprise would work with disposal of our older units, and again, it does defray the cost of, to the fund itself. They currently average about 12% above traditional auction results, in part because of the network that they have access to. Approximately 21 days to sell the older units on our behalf. Buyers aren't going to know they came from Monroe. And there's a number of wholesale sources that they utilize for their fleet management and system. So. Next part of it is just the city, I think it's important also to keep in mind, it's based on our identification number. So, we retain having an option to purchase vehicles through, as I said earlier, the My Deal program or any other governmental purchasing, if better. I mean, we're not going to hold ourselves if Enterprise is able to come with a better pricing. We'll obviously take that, but that's a decision that they allow us to make. And that there's no formal contract, as it said with the bullet down there regarding Enterprise, that we can find a better pricing. And then we certainly are going to confirm from our end of it, city administration, certainly be myself, Mr. Sell, Patrick Lewis, Bill Walters, to make sure that the competitive pricing is appropriate for them. And again, what I liked about the video was the county administrator there, in that case in Kern County, talking about, well, we're going to give this a shot for a year. We're not hooked into it forever. I think it's worth a start, and there's always the opportunity in our case to, these aren't open-ended leases. If we want to buy them back at any point in time, we have that capability and do our own potential financing. That's always an option that we retain. But if it meets our expectations, we would continue to proceed going forward with the purchase of others. And then the last piece, next one already says what we do if we don't meet our expectations. We can still have the option to get out of the program. And then lastly, I think I threw in a couple of other considerations. Certainly the waiver of bids, we have the ability to bid for this, but we would be, much like with the My Deal and other purchasing, piggybacking on a couple of other counties that are, I shouldn't say counties, but entities that have bid this out, and they would be giving us the pricing that they went through their bid process. And this is this is by no means the list of jurisdiction. There's probably well over 30 jurisdictions in the state of Michigan that are utilizing enterprise service. And then at some point in the future, we may consider putting the police fleet, on this as well. And then lastly, if you have questions, opportunity to comment, if council is comfortable with this, then we'll continue moving forward with the planning process and look to more of a formal approval as early as the August 6th meeting.
Thanks, Vince. Any questions from council or Mr. Pastu at this point? Obviously that is looking to see if there's concerns to continue to move forward, at least to be able to come back to council at a later date with I guess an fact sheet and action item possibly. And obviously if you don't have them right now, you can always share those with the city manager at another time. Councilman Felder.
Yes, just one question about vehicle maintenance. Enterprise handles the maintenance on their own vehicles through the leases that we.
I think it's important we actually have the flexibility to continue our maintenance if that's what we desire to do. So they'll have a number of vendors, and then I think there's 3 or 4 locally that would be closest to handle that. But that we would set up our own personnel to be able to handle some of that maintenance and recording what took place with that specific vehicle. And we will still do some of the prep stuff, such as putting the logos on, those type of things. But beyond that, yeah, we still have that capability.
Okay, because my question was specifically with regards to the mechanics out of DPS and just making sure that, wondering if they could be incorporated in this plan, if they would attrition out before it took full effect. What was the plan there?
Yeah, no, I think that clearly there's enough to keep them busy.
Okay.
Kevin, that was my old public works director, Patrick and Bill, this last year during the budget process, was kind of saying, well, it'd be really good if we had maybe 2.5 mechanics, and I think in some ways this would help in diminishing that load. So, but clearly I don't see any purpose of reducing the number of personnel that we have at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions this evening? Okay, seeing none. Vince, next item, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jason, appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you both.
Sam, the next item that we have is to, and it's on tonight's agenda, is just approval for retaining Foster Swift, Jack Vancouvering to provide legal assistance with the DTE tax case. Sam?
Okay, thank you. Sam Guide, City Assessor. Good evening, Council, Honorable Mayor. Just a quick review of the issues that have to be settled and why these lead to the requirement of having to have an attorney that specializes in a very narrow field, i.e. property tax appeals, and in particular coal plant appeals. And most of this I think that you've probably already heard, but just a quick review for a few minutes. The issues that need to be settled here are as follows. We have to determine what the proper market area is from which to pick comparable power plant sales, and that boils down to, for the most part, regulated states and plants versus deregulated states and plants. So that's one issue. And running concurrently with that, and equally as important, if not more important, is what is the highest and best use of this power plant? Is it as a merchant plant in a non-regulated state, or is it as a baseload plant in a regulated state? So that's an important question that has to be answered in this issue. Thirdly, we have to determine what is the proper starting point in this income stream that DTE is realizing from the proper operation of this power plant. Is it the wholesale market price into which electricity is sold, or is it the end user rate approved by the MPSC? So what is the proper starting point in the income production of this plant? Number 4, we have to define whether this is a baseload plant or a merchant, i.e. competitive plant in a non-regulated state, a deregulated state. And again, that ties back into the proper market area and the highest and best use of this plant. Number 5, where are we at, or not, where is DTE at with pollution control compliance? meaning what more investment do they have to make this plant compliant with current pollution control requirements as well as future pollution control requirements, and how does that compare to power plants in other states? Number 6, the remaining plant economic life has to be established. Why is this important? Well, it's important because that determines the durability of the income stream that DTE is utilizing from the operation of this plant. In other words, an investor is probably more interested in an income stream that's guaranteed to last for 25 or 30 years than he or she is in an income stream that's guaranteed to last for only 5 years. So that's an important issue that has to be settled here. Finally, the 3 approaches in appraisal, a cost approach, sales comparison approach, and income approach, or discounted cash flow, each of those approaches has to be weighed as far as applicability and what is the best indicator of value of this plant. So having said all that, those specific issues, we need an attorney that is familiar with issues such as this. Probably DTE is going to be pretty aggressive in their pursuit of lowering the value of the plant. So that means that we're going to need an attorney that is familiar with the issues from the onset, rather than being brought on board in later stages. Secondly, I may be able to handle quite a bit of this, quite a bit of the filings and pleadings that DTE makes, but only up to a certain point for both complexity and volume of filings that I anticipate will be happening here. My concentration has to be on appraisal input, the value of the plant. I can't be spending a whole lot of time on trying to answer pleadings and interrogatories and things of that nature. And also, I can't forget about 8,500 other parcels that have to have an assessment placed on them. So what that leads to is that we need an attorney that can be a powerful advocate for proper appraisal methodologies and techniques. And in these 2 attorneys that I talked with recently, as far as sent questions to see if we'd be on the same page, and I believe I CC'd all of you on that, of the 2 of them, who are probably the most qualified attorneys that I know in issues like this, Van Covering would be the better choice because he is much more familiar with power plant issues, having served as the attorney in a number of recent cases involving coal plant issues. Secondly, and even if this wasn't the case, I would still recommend Van Covering, is that he is $150 per hour less expensive than his roads. So, having said all of that, my recommendation would be that we engage the services of Van Covering to assist in what appears to be a full-fledged, or shaping up to be a full-fledged battle here with DTE over the value of this plant. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
I'll see, Mr. Pastor, is there anything further? If not, I'll see if council has any questions for our city assessor. Any questions right off? I think it's a quick review, but also, as was stated, this is an item on tonight's council action as well. Councilman Lamore.
Yes, yeah, just on the attorney we're looking at taking our side with, what's his success rate with those previous companies? Do we know that?
Yes. In particular, I can't comment on a percentage of success, and success is kind of hard to define in valuation issues, because are you successful only if you achieve the position you advocated at the beginning, or are you successful if you achieved 80% of that, or 60%, or 40%? So it's kind of hard to define success, but I can say this. In the case of the Campbell plant, Port Sheldon versus Campbell, the recent coal plant issue at the tax court that was recently settled, short of having to actually go to hearing, they had settled at an effective rate of around $262 per kilowatt. And as I recall, Consumers Power was requesting something in the area of $150 per kilowatt, and the value that was on a roll that was attempted to be defended by the township was, I believe, around $330 or $340. So that's kind of a perspective. 262 settled on, 340 something the township had, and 150 plus or minus what the Consumers Power was asking for. To put that in perspective for the Monroe plant, we are on a roll right now at a little over $300 per kilowatt.
Other questions for Sam this evening?
I just have a small comment on
Sure.
the question.
Councilman Felder?
Mr. Gewick, this affects all of us, and all of us are invested in this issue, but I find that you are the one down in the trenches fighting this battle. And I just wanted to thank you for the work that you've put into this. That's all.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that.
There's no other questions for Mr. Geitch. I thank Sam for being here as always.
Thank you for having me.
Interesting. I always learn something when you talk about these items. Mr. Pastu, next item, please.
Next item is, we're gonna do a quick little PowerPoint. City administration is recommending council to consider authorizing the purchase of a new Vector truck for the Department of Public Services. And so I kind of want to run through it real quick with you. The discussion outline is what's DPS using a Vector truck for, our current practice, the options considered, and financing. So a lot of folks may not know what a Vector truck is, and so we decided to put a couple of pictures in here, but certainly a mechanism for going in and cleaning out catch basins. It also has the ability to go into lines and clean those out. A feature with the hose there probably has a rotor there that shoots water and pulls it back, any debris, and then removes it from the line in the catch basin. From my end of it, it's a phenomenally important thing for us to do to maintain our storm sewer system. And as we go looking at some numbers here, we've certainly, and again, there's not casting any comment about it, but I will tell you the last 10 years in municipal government in Michigan has been a struggle. And so one of the things that we need to start doing is to start catching back up on some of our infrastructure maintenance. And again, as I said, cleaning out the catch basins, storm sewer main. Part of the thing I want to tell you is when you have, if you've got clean catch basins and storm sewer lines, they can store a lot of rainwater before they start emptying out onto the street. And so we currently have 73.5 miles, if you go back, and that includes some of our responsibilities with our MDOT roads, such as Telegraph in North and South Monroe, and Custer, right? Yeah. We do Telegraph? Part of it?
It's not on our contract.
Okay,
We
all right,
sometimes get
all right.
stuck doing it.
I said that and I go, what? I'm not sure I was right on that. Last year I kind of encouraged DPS, being my first full year in 2017. Let's see what we can get accomplished. They did over 6 miles of cleaning with the work, and the sweeper reassignment is, historically we've had 2 street sweepers going all the time, and we pulled one off, and once we get through the spring cleaning, that's always a pain, and also in the fall, we put them back out there. But clearly, we're redeploying our personnel to be in doing that. And the previous 2 years, we did 1 and 2 miles. And again, keep that in the context of a 73-mile system. And so our goal is, we really would like to get to 6 to 8 miles per year cleaned initially, and then hopefully within the next 10 years be pretty close to having at least gone through once. But as we go through it, you've got to break it up. And again, think of years and years of leaves and grass and debris accumulating on the base, decaying there so there's quite a bit of buildup that takes place with that. And so we want to get back to doing that. And part of it, by the ask in my case to start doing more of this, is the need for tools to do the work. Historically, DPS has gotten a hand-me-down from the utilities department. Pay the trade-in difference has been what the trade has been. Usually you get it back after 7 or more years. The current model is a 2001, so they've had it for a while. The significant is, once the sanitary sewer operation is done with it, it's been in a pretty nasty environment, cleaning it, with the sanitary sewer lines and manholes, it's a bad environment, and by that time, it's served a pretty tough life before it goes over to DPS. So the important thing is the need for some reliable equipment. I'll tell you, when we get there, the one that we have now is down and has been down for quite some time. And as I said, we currently operate 2 street sweepers regularly. This would go to 1 on a regular basis, and then have them on the ends of the season for spring and fall. Good. So this last year, when our Vector truck went down in the spring, we were looking at about $110,000 to repair it. Most of it was related to the tank itself, but plus other improvements. So we contemplated looking at a lease. Lease is around $13,000 a month. The one thing we didn't look into great detail is contracting for this service. And in part, I will tell you that one of the concerns I have, and when things were bad 10 years ago, and city councils and commissioners and managers were considering everything, I said there really isn't a public works service that I couldn't contract for. The problem is that when you get a storm, what do you have to respond with? You don't have any people or any equipment. So I think that's a significant consideration, certainly from my end of it. You do have to have some personnel to respond to whether it's a winter emergency or a storm in the summertime, or even a man-made emergency that may take place. So when we went through it, I've asked them to look at purchasing Doheny, a pretty known, reputable vendor here in the state of Michigan. Frederickson, also probably more prominent on the west side. And after meeting with our DPS personnel, they would rather go with the higher one, Frederick Supply. There's a lot of features that they prefer to it, but interestingly enough, it's more mechanical and less electrical and computer oriented. And again, I will tell you in the discussion with it, and it made perfect sense, this is going to be this first purchase is going to be tough. There's a lot to clean out, and I think having more of a mechanical system gave them a lot more comfort than if you had one with all the touchscreen materials and computers that go with it. If the computer goes, nothing functions. And so I think from their end of it, they're more comfortable. So even though it's I think $9,000 more for it, it was something that they felt strongly that they would prefer to have that item. So to move on to the financing end of it, Mr. Sells looked at the installment purchase, and certainly the 10-year is a reasonable time period for its purchase. Estimated 4% interest, annual payment about $52,500. This isn't an expense that comes out of our refuse fund, which is millage driven. We would anticipate a millage increase that just specifically associated with this of being 0.055 mils. Marginal impact, if your house true cash value is $100,000, would be $2.75, $2.75 a year, and if it's a more pricey home, true cash value at $200,000, you're looking at roughly $5.50 more per year. I do think long term it's a better value to do this. You provide our DPS employees with equipment that's reliable to do a job that we know it's going to take quite some time to get to the condition that we really think it should be. So with that, and certainly take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Pastu. Any comments or questions from council for the city manager? Councilman Lamore.
Yeah, the more technologically advanced vehicle, is that something that could be stripped down to become the other one, or?
I'm not sure. I'll look at Patrick. I'm not sure if it. I think that a lot of those things are so fully integrated anymore that it's almost impossible to do.
Well, I'm not a mechanic, so I can't say for sure, but that's my understanding
Yeah.
as well.
Okay. Then maybe this question can follow up on as this comes forward as well.
Okay.
You're good. Yep.
Question, Your Honor.
Yes.
Who determines the amortization term?
That was something Mr. Sell, but certainly you don't want to finance it beyond the expected life of it.
What's the expected life?
Easily be more than 10 years. Those should easily last 10, 15, probably 15 years. If you work them hard, 15 years out of as long as you take good care of them and maintain them.
Well, if we increase the amortization rate, then the millage rate would be a little bit less to the. Have you run that analysis?
We haven't, but I think 10 years is, to be honest with you, probably on the far end where I would even be comfortable pushing it. I'm looking at Mr. Sell, he's probably nodding his head out there. Actually, in some ways, I even thought, be really conservative to maybe go 7 years. So, so when Ed came back and was comfortable with 10, I was,
Honorable Mayor and Council, Ed Sell, Assistant City Manager, Finance Director. The reason I put 10 years in there is this would be an installment purchase type financing, and everything I've learned in the past says that if you go any further than 10 years, the banks start to lose lots of interest in it. So 10 is probably about the limit. I think we could go with it.
okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, we'll look forward to seeing that, I think, in the future.
If there's
Unless there's
no
comments.
questions, I mean, our intent would be to bring this back at the August 6th meeting, so.
I think there's just one question to follow up on, some information,
Yes.
and bring
Yep.
that back
Yep.
with the presentation. Okay, next item, please.
This one is going to I'll do very quickly. We still have a couple of meetings, but I just wanted to do the introduction with the guaranteed maximum price process for the fire station. Obviously, in 2017, AUK was selected, George AUK Construction was selected as our construction manager at risk for the fire station. And part of what their process is, and they've been certainly involved with us in the process, certainly from the design development and even through some of the construction drawings, is helping with the decision-making process regarding different aspects of the project to help with the pricing end of it. They're currently at the point right now where they're soliciting bids for the project from all of the trades that are out there. So the construction drawings have been completed. They are now bid out meeting with their subcontractors to perform the work. What will happen is they'll have an accumulation of all of these bids, and they'll ask for our participation in the process with some of those selections of the subcontractors. But you'll get they'll present to us based on that process, the bid process conclusion is this is what the maximum guaranteed price that they're comfortable with providing us to go forward with the project. It does have a contingency built in there, and obviously what'll happen, there's a means of drawing from that contingency, but it's agreed upon by both city representatives and AUK. But it really is the point in which you decide we're going to go forward with this project. And so just wanted to kind of introduce that for our newer council members tonight. We did talk about that last year a little bit, but more importantly, coming back on the meeting on the 17th, we'll do an update. I think I can't remember, maybe back in January, we did do a presentation on where the project financing was, and so this will be an opportunity to give you an update and have a little more of a dialogue, if you will, about, okay, this is the threshold where we're looking at whether we go or no go. A couple meetings ago, there was a concern about, the tariff out there. And as I said, AUK indicated to us over 50% of the trades touch steel. So it is a concern of mine, and so we'll see, where that is. But we have to have a discussion at some point where you're going to be forced at the August 20th meeting to pull the trigger or not. And so the more I can get you comfortable with the process and informed as to, where that line is and have you give some consideration to it, we'll be able to make a quicker decision.
Any questions on the updates? And as always, if there are, the city manager will look forward to that coming back as well. Next item, please.
Next item is, I just wanted to talk briefly about the bids for the house demolitions. I'm going to present to you a handout. We had the bid opening last Monday on July 9th. We received a total of 4 bids. 3 of them we were comfortable with. The low bid on this, we weren't comfortable necessarily with their ability to meet, I think, some of the MISHTA CDBG work with their qualifications, but also this is 27 homes getting demolished, and we were not comfortable that they would be able to necessarily, and certainly not providing enough detail that they would be able to meet that in the course of the 2-month period that we were insisting upon. So after some dialogue with that, certainly with, in the case of the engineering department, talking with J. Keith Construction, who did submit the low bid, and Salon Bean Trucking, what we're going to recommend is an action, and actually what I would do is ask the council to substitute this language from what was presented with the packet, but essentially it is approve an agreement with J. Keith Construction in the amount of $39,942 for the following building demolitions: 317 East First, 122 Glendale, 1619 Peters. These are all that are funded out of our general fund. I think the Peters one we would like to see demolished quickly because it was a burned structure. The rest of them don't have the sense of urgency that the others do. And then approve an agreement with Salon Bean Trucking and Excavating in the amount of $431,129 for the remaining demolitions. There's a $20,000 contingency for the project, and certainly as with these contracts, authorize the mayor and clerk treasurer to sign, and then authorize the assistant city manager finance director to amend the major street budget by $35,000. Those are the properties on Front Street between the railroads, and then transfer some of the remaining money that we did not spend this last fiscal year in 2017-18 into the current fiscal year that just started here July 1st for this. So we think all the parties are fine with that transaction. It does lower our cost from the amount with Salon Bean, but it also gives an opportunity for smaller contractor to at least maybe establish a relationship as we anticipate more demolitions taking place.
Questions for the city manager? Comments? I'm just going to make one quick comment. It is a council action item on the agenda. I just want to make a comment related to the associated demolition program chart. I want to thank Toby Worrell for putting this together. I think it was done well. I liked not only the list of those that were bidding, but how it was laid out, and particularly the grant source funding and where that's coming from, whether it be general fund or otherwise, where the funds are being spent. Really helped look through that, quickly understand why they were placed, where they were placed, and why they were separated. And it actually makes this proposal as was amended or being presented now for the three to the other contractor easier to understand and see. Just my congrats to the staff on putting this together. It's good to read. Other comments? Seeing none. Mr. Festu?
Well, this is a moment where the city manager is going to have to call an audible, and Mr. Angeli indicated he's not going to be able to attend the regular meeting, and we only have 5 council members at this moment in time. And there's a lot of items on the agenda tonight, on the regular agenda, that require 5 votes, obviously with the absence of Councilmember Vining and Whitman. So I'm going to talk this thing through with the council, but what I might ask you to do is to take what we have on council action and just move it to consent. I think if we can keep them around for 5 minutes, that might help. But I'll throw that out there because other than 2 of the 3 of the items, I'm not sure we could go through the agenda without being able to. We just have to move all the other items to another date.
We have a public hearing that starts, and that has to be there if the item under the first council action is to continue. There are 5 items on the council action, and I just in preparation, because as we had calls from council members that came in and some unexpected emergencies that arose, they're not here, so I was just in preparation recognizing that many of these are contracts, agreements, and they require 5 votes. So it's, as is by the charter. So these items under council action, every one of them require a 5-vote action. Consent agenda, there's 4 others, and I think there's only 3 items that don't require a 5-vote because they're about contracts, about bid approvals, agreements, letter of engagements. I could go on. I think the list is out there for everybody. So understand that. I was going to make this comment before the council action, so now's my time. Just as we've done in the past, we recognize that council should make sure they're aware, they understand that 5 votes are required for certain actions, and I just kind of went through those. So I guess I'm looking Mr. Buds first for the, our city attorney, regarding the items that are under council action. And I'm not sure if this works with Councilman Ecklanger or not, if they were moved into the consent agenda. One cannot. Doesn't mean it still might be pulled by a council member, which is everybody's prerogative to pull an item for further discussion rather than being passed on the consent agenda. Just saying. So I'll ask Mr. Buds if one, can that be, and two, should it be?
Your Honor, so I think it would be possible to amend the agenda under item 4 of the agenda to move all items to the consent agenda, but I think Your Honor has accurately stated any council member or member of the public could pull one of those items for further discussion.
That's correct. I said council, but also the public here may want to pull one of those items for discussion, which is the ability to do, and knowing that some of them require, as I stated, a 5 vote to pass. So,
I apologize, Your Honor. It's very rare that any of us are missing from the meeting, but I have a commitment. I have to be in Ann Arbor at 8:30 to pick up my daughter, so I was unaware that Kelly or Paula were not going to be in attendance tonight.
yeah, those came in this afternoon. One is very ill. Could barely speak to me on the phone. The other had a personal family emergency.
I apologize.
Well, and time-wise, I don't know if that even works. I know you have a timeline to think about, so we'll see where you, what happens on the break before we get started and go from
The
there.
question I have, is there anything on there that requires a 5-2 vote that can't wait until the next meeting? That's the other question.
And of course, nobody up here is speculating that there's going to be 5 votes for any of these items either.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm not implying that for those that are here or those that will be watching later, because we don't know how the votes will be. And maybe it's best to just making motions to postpone, because it cannot pass 4 people.
Would, I'm gonna throw this out here, like the demolition bids, the PUD, we can hold a public hearing with 4, but not take action on the contract, or the rezoning. Is it possible to have call a special meeting, just to go through that if we had to?
Well, special meeting, well, we'll look at the city attorney, but I know special meetings can be
You're gonna
called.
be gone too. That's right.
The 30th would be the earliest date, which is 2 weeks. So, we're still in the work session, we haven't got to the meeting, so. I'm sure we'll resolve it in the next 6 minutes.
Yeah.
I hope so. So, unless there's other comments right now, I think it's something to contemplate as we get ready to start at 7:30. And maybe Mr. Buds can think about this as well.
You gotta go.
So, Mr. Pastu, other items on the work session?
Nothing else from my end, Your Honor.
The other, last item was there items for the regular meeting agenda, if there's any comments from council. I think we have one regarding a complication, we understand. Others from council, any items you need clarification on or questions before? No. Okay. Seeing none, at this point, we'll close the work session.